Hello guys, welcome to Self-Love Sessions. Thank you so much for tuning into the vlog and into the podcast. And I hope some people are finding a little bit of value from these little chinwags daily. Okay, cool. So today we're going to be talking about why we put ourselves last and why we put everyone else and their dogs and their homework and their housework and the chores and the washing in front of us. So why do we prioritise everything else before we look after ourselves? Why don't we make our own self-care a priority? Now, these self-love sessions are basically tips, tools, tricks, teachings and understandings of how to come back to loving yourself to the core. Now, this is something that I've been, this is a self-inquiry that I've been working on for many, many years now, since I was about 15 and now I'm 36. So I've got a lot of stuff to share, and it's also been things that I've learned along the way that I now feel the need to give back to other people because they've helped and healed me and allowed me to come back to a deep sense of contentment within myself. So when we're talking about self-love, when we think about the actions that need to be taken towards coming to self-love, it's actually about self-care. Now, self-care and self-love are different things entirely, as you know. Self-love is continuous. It's not something that you can learn. However, self-care are things that you can learn to bring you back to self-love. Okay? So self-love is something that's already there. Self-care are tools to bring you back to knowing what is already there. Okay? So self-love isn't something that you gain. It's something that you know, and it's something that you feel, and it's an experience that you hold within yourself that can't be messed with. It can't be tainted by anything. It's just a feeling of wholesomeness and a knowing that you are worthy and good enough as you are, okay? That's real self-love. Now, self-care, which is the thing that we always think has to come last when it comes to ourselves. Self-care is something that you do daily. That might look different to everybody, right? It might come in the form of exercise, it might come in the form of nutritious eating, it might come in the form of rest, it might come in the form of compassionate exercises towards yourself, meditation, stillness, self-inquiry, a blend of all of them things, pretty good, pretty helpful. But it looks different for different people, right? But essentially, self-care is the little steps that we take on a daily basis to allow us to come back to understanding our self-love. Okay? Without the self-care, it's very, very challenging to have that self-love because we're not caring for ourselves. We're not giving ourselves that emotional, mental, energetic and spiritual well-being that is necessary to know what self-love is. Okay, so if we're not actually giving ourselves the time, if we're not actually prioritising our own self-care, it's almost impossible to come back to self-love. So if we're actually not taking the actions in the first place, and they always are going to like the bottom of the washing pile, it can be a really smelly, dirty old place. When it's getting to the bottom of the washing pile and we're just going like, let's do somebody else's washing, let's do somebody else's things first. Oh, that pasta needs cooking, that chair needs brushing, the carpet needs hoovering. All of these things are getting done before we look after ourselves. Or they're getting done and then we're thinking we can leave ourselves out. Give. Ooh, I'm not worthy of that giving. I'm not worthy of that lovely gift that I'm giving out to everybody else. If we're not getting to that point where we're actually taking the action to come back to understanding self-love, we're never going to get there. So one of the most important things to do is to take the action. And the action is coming in these little habits, these helpful self-care habits that we do daily to bring us back to self-love. Now, this is something that I've struggled with in the past. So it's something that I want to talk about in this podcast. I always had this strange misconception that I came last, which essentially is putting out the message to everybody else and everything else around me, even the housework or making the house look nice. The house now thinks that I am less important than it, and it's simply not true, right? Like the old saying goes, always put your own life belt on in a plane, or your life jacket on in a plane before you assist somebody else, because without you, nothing good's going to happen. Okay, that's how important you are. That is how vital you are, and that is how worthy you are. Okay, so imagine you just sat there and did absolutely nothing ever again in your house. Can you imagine, number one, what a shit tip the house would be? Can you imagine, number two, how everybody would help themselves and feed themselves? Can you imagine the chaos that would happen in even your domestic space, in your workspace, in your relationships, in the relationship that you had with yourself and everybody around you, the way in which you move through life, the relationship you had with your children and your peers and your workforce? What relationship would you have with people? Well, it would all go to pot because you haven't looked after yourself. So without you, without your vital life force batteries being charged up, you cannot offer that gift of giving and helping to anybody else. So prioritising self-care is absolutely vital, and it's the highest form of self-respect. And when you're not giving yourself self-respect, but you're going out there giving everybody else respect, you're essentially showing people how to treat you. So when you go out there and you give, but you're not giving back to yourself, by the way, giving is a two-sided thing. When you feel like you're taking, actually you're giving. Yeah, stop thinking about give and take. Think about give and give. It's a continuum. Yeah, give. It's all the same thing, but we feel that we're separate to that giving process. Now, how can you think about giving? Always give, and it comes back, right? Because everything in life, what you give must come back as a gift, because it's a continuum, right? It's an ecosystem. So think about, why am I missing myself out? First of all, why am I at the bottom of the pile? Why am I at the bottom of the pile when I need my batteries charged? I need my nervous system to be balanced. I need my emotional state to be balanced. I need my mind to be nice and clear. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to give my energy to other people. So think about it in that way. I did a poll actually on Instagram the other day, and I did a couple of different answers basically to what is it that stops you from being consistent with your own self-care. And there was a few different answers. Anyway, the absolute main one that blew everything out of the water by 90% was, I always think I need to be doing chores, housework, looking after everybody else before I can look after myself. Now, that was the main thing that people answered that stopped them from doing their own self-care. So when we come to that point of feeling that we are less than somebody else, how are we meant to teach others that those people are worthy? For example, if we are raising children, I don't have children, and I'm probably not right to say this, but I'm thinking about it in a So when we are stressed and when we're running around and being chaotic and being hectic and doing everything for everybody all the time but never us, the healthiest thing that we could possibly do is to stop and take time for ourselves. A moment of silence. Hopefully it's more than a moment. Do you know what I mean? If we don't have 3 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to give to ourselves, then something is wrong with the world. And so when we're running around like a headless chicken, as the saying goes, and feeling stressed and feeling like we can't fit everything in. Yeah, chaotic is maybe the word. Brain fog, not knowing what to do next because there's so much going on. The healthiest thing we can do is stop and give ourselves some self-time to balance out our energy. Now, in yoga, or a yogi, I like to define somebody who practices yoga as not somebody who can do handstands and certain moves on the mat, but it's somebody who understands how to balance their own energy. Now, essentially in life, this is what we're doing. We're learning how to balance our own energy. And if we're running around everywhere, doing everything, and we're coming to the absolute bottom of the pile, we're not balancing our energy correctly. And therefore we cannot give our energy correctly, and therefore we burn out, and then we're good for nothing. Okay, so it's all about that balance. The physical body is about balance. The mind is about balance. Our emotions are about balance. Everything in life is about balance, right? Yin and yang, sun and moon, balance. Day and night, balance. If you're doing all this and not giving it back, you're not balanced. And it needs to be balanced because it has to be give, 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 give. Give, give, give. Imagine giving is a circle and you're part of that circle, right? And if you're not doing it, it needs to happen to be able to come back to self-love. So that's like the first step. So why is self-care not held in such high regard? Why is it that caring for other people is held in such high regard and self-care isn't? And I think there's some misconceptions around what self-care is. And a lot of it I have had to be busting out of the way as I've been learning to come back to this sense of self-respect within myself. I've always wanted to have a deep sense of self-love because that's the place that I can be kind to others from. That's the place I can be compassionate to others from. That's the place that I teach some of the most profound teachings that I've been taught throughout my life from other teachers and that I've then given back, etc., etc. I can't do that if I'm not coming from a good space of self-love, because I start to teach from the ego and I start to teach from a competitiveness, and I start to teach from I and me, and it's all about me, and it's, you know how it goes. You're a human, you know how it goes, right? But teaching comes from the heart, and for me as a teacher of Kundalini yoga and a spiritual teacher somewhere along the lines, I have to keep coming back to that sense of self-love towards myself so that I'm not continuously working from the ego and from a distracted mindset. So there was a couple of misconceptions that I really had to dig deep into to understand why it was that I wasn't giving myself the self-care that I needed to come back to that self-love that I knew I had. And it's things that I've sort of picked up along the way in society. So, for example, one of the misconceptions about self-care is that it's selfish, right? You've probably heard it before. People say it, don't they? You know, or you might think it yourself, you know, am I selfish for doing self-care? And, oh, that person's selfish, all they do is think about themselves. But it's not thinking about yourself. Essentially, whenever I'm giving myself self-care and daily I'm doing the things that I know make me feel good to come back to that lovely unconditional love about myself, when I'm doing that, and only when I'm doing that, is when I am the most performative, the most productive, and the most essentially giving to others that I possibly can be, because my energy is working. It's flowing like water. It's not stuck. It's not stagnant. The mind's not chaotic, I feel clarity, I feel focus, and that comes from taking time for myself very often, very, very often, so that I can give it back. That's not selfish, that's very caring. It's selfish to do the opposite. It's selfish to give everything and not replenish your own batteries, because then you're only giving half of yourself. Don't you want to give your full self when you're trying to help somebody, heal somebody, teach somebody, your children, or if you're a specialist in your workplace and you want to influence people, in your workplace, your peers? Don't you want to give the best of yourself in a conversation with your friends? Don't you want to give the best of yourself when you've got a family member who needs your support? Don't you want to give the best of yourself in life? And you can't do that if you're not taking that time to yourself. So essentially, taking yourself time, the worst misconception is that it's selfish. It's selfless. So get that one out of your head, because it's simply not true. So to help others more and to give to others more, which is the thing that we like to do because we're humans and we're an ecosystem, and giving is a circular, which involves you. You're part of that circle. Then the most important thing is to look after number one first. Fill up your own batteries first. Now the next thing is that I feel that what I've struggled with in the past is that I've not known my own worth. I have not recognised my own worth, as if I'm not worthy enough, and this comes from a self-esteem issue. I'm not worthy enough of having my own self-time. Like, I should be doing this for somebody else. Should I be cooking so-and-so's dinner? Is that person okay? Is that person okay? I probably shouldn't sit down and do my own self-care because I'm a messy little bastard and I need to get this house clean. And look at what the shambles of a life I'm living, right? Negative self-talk, not very kind to yourself. And that's somewhere along the lines. It's a realization of not liking yourself, not knowing your own worth. And until you can know your own worth, which comes with self-care, it's almost like a double-edged sword. Is that the way to describe it? Maybe catch-22. You have to do the care stuff, self-care habits, to know your own self-worth. And your own self-worth comes from self-love. So it's like a catch-22. But just getting into the habit of doing those self-care things, even if it's just a short habit to start with, and then building it up once you start to build that really deep inner real confidence that comes from your heart, that comes from your soul and your spirit. So just almost like, again, faking it till you make it, but doing it. Take the action every day to come back to that self-care so that you can start to recognise your own self-worth. Another misconception is that I feel that we might confuse rescuing people with caring for people. I am speaking for myself here, so I'm just taking things that I've found that have been a problem with me in the past, and things that my students and our community tends to talk about on a regular basis, that they've felt like the feeling of the need to rescue people. This tends to be sometimes maybe like a feminine energy, a motherly thing, a maternal thing, somewhere along the lines, that the woman's role is to care and look after people. And can it turn into something of the need to rescue somebody, rescue this from getting dirty, rescue that washing up pot from getting too full, rescue that pile of washing from getting really smelly and nobody else can do it, rescuing that person. And actually when we're doing this, we're not teaching people, are we? There's a difference between caring and rescuing. Caring for somebody can sometimes come along the lines of giving yourself self-love, because people do something about themselves. People change themselves. People care for themselves when they see that somebody else is doing that, somebody else that they look up to. So it's an essence of inspiring somebody more so than holding their hand and going, this is how you do this and this is how you do that. Because in essence, it's like, who are we to say what is right for somebody else's life? You know, who are we to go, give me a hand, this is how we do it? You know, that's just us sort of like owning that person's situation. And I've definitely felt like I've probably done that in the past. So that has been definitely a lesson for me. And I know that people that I speak to on a regular basis in our community have also talked about this, that a lesson for them is this feeling of rescuing. Now, a good little thing that you can do when you're feeling, am I rescuing somebody here or am I caring for somebody here? And it's to look inside yourself and to know that caring is always a good thing, giving is always a good thing, but holding somebody's hand along the way is not always a caring thing. Sometimes people need to learn for themselves. When a child starts to walk, you don't grab its feet, do you, and go, douche, douche. I mean, sometimes you're supporting it, sure, right? Support, caring, doing, sometimes rescuing. And again, this is different for different people, and like, who am I to say what caring and rescuing is? There's boundaries within those things as well, and everybody has a different experience of life. I'm just talking about where I've come from and discussions that I have within my community as well, our community as well. So sometimes we keep confused rescuing with caring. Okay, we don't have to rescue everybody. Don't have to rescue everybody. Sometimes people need to learn by example. So if you're there going, I'm taking time for my self-care, I'm going to put really good habits into my daily life, I'm going to show up to myself daily because I'm worthy of myself and I'm giving to myself. I'm not taking anything. Energy is a continuum. It's there for the giving, 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 giving. Give to you, give to them, circular. It's endless as long as it's a circle. It's not endless if it's just going in one direction to one end of the triangle. It's endless if it's a circle. Think of giving as a circle and you're included in it. If you are teaching people that you are worthy enough to be in that circle, you are worthy enough and equal enough as everybody else to be in that circle of self-care, then you're teaching the biggest lesson that you can teach. Don't have to walk them and rescue them. The best thing that you can do, I think, or the best thing I've found that I like to do to teach others, somebody who might be struggling with anxiety or whatever, is to show that I'm taking action every single day. And this is how I help with my own anxiety. I look after myself, I look after myself, I look after myself, okay? It's teaching people you're worthy. And guess what that does? It teaches them that they're worthy. And it's as simple as that. When we don't teach people that we're worthy because we say, oh, I don't have the time for self-care, I put everything else first, I'm not worthy enough, I think they're more important than me, then we're teaching that message and that energy reflects outwards, and it doesn't help or heal anybody, it's just a karmic trench. So the patterns go into our DNA and then they start to carry on forming this way in which we treat each other throughout generations, right? So self-care is essential and it should be a priority. And so there's lots of reasons why we might not put our self-care first and think that we are not worthy enough for this self-care. But one of the last things I'm going to talk about on this, just so I don't go on forever, is that we don't realise that we teach people how to treat us. Whether that comes to relationships, whether it comes to the workplace, whether it comes to, I don't know, romantic or friendship relationships, whatever relationships that go on the planet, and our own relationship with ourselves. Essentially, when we are putting ourselves last, we are teaching people how to treat us. So when we go through relationships throughout our life, wherever those relationships are formed, if we decide we are not worthy enough of our own self-care and we are not prioritising ourselves, then that energy is teaching somebody else how to treat us. So then we start to get the treatment that we think we deserve. And it's simply not what we deserve, is it? We are just as deserving as everybody else on this planet because everything is a circle. Now, they're the sort of 4 little points that I wanted to make. They're the things that I've struggled with. So if putting yourself first is something that you struggle with also, then I really do hope that they helped, not help that they hoped. I hope that they helped, and putting things into action. So a couple of little things to maybe take away from this podcast is to understand self-worth, to understand self-love. It's already something that you have. It's not something that you have to gain, but what has to happen is you have to take action towards finding that again, because we have covered it up in many layers, many distractions, many untruths about ourselves. So to uncover that truth of who we really are, which is essentially our unconditional and self-love, we must take action with self-care daily to come back to that. When you do that consistently, daily, it happens to be the case that you come back to that space. Now, it takes practice, it takes patience, it's part of a healing process, but you've got to get started for it to work, and you've got to keep up for it to work. You can't get started, then not do it, then expect it to work. It's all about keeping up. There's a little saying in Kundalini Yoga, keep up and you will be kept up. So do the little things daily, the tiny little baby steps. Take one little step at a time daily for your own self-care, and then the self-care will look after you. Okay, even if it's 3 minutes. So little challenge. Let me know in the comments, are you going to give yourself some time today? Are you going to prioritise yourself today? How can you watch your mind a little bit when you start to go down that negative pattern, that negative thought pattern, that negative rabbit hole? I'm not worthy enough of my own self-care. I'm selfish if I take this time to myself. I should be doing everything else first. I should be doing my chores first. This. And poof, the day's gone. And again, I haven't done anything to look after myself. What are you going to do today? What action are you going to do today? Let me know in the comments to look after yourself first. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I hope you got some value out of this podcast. And Satnam, peace and love. Ciao.